Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing a Rakan guide for Season 12. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream on Twitch, starting around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And that's every single night, like I said, only on Twitch, no longer on YouTube. We used to stream on YouTube. We've moved the streaming over to Twitch, but we're still going to be doing tons of guides and tier lists and lots of other content like this on YouTube. So be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, follow on Twitch, and check out all the content. And then you can also find me on Twitter if you want an extra layer of notifications. The Strategy Professor at the Strat Prof on Twitter. I don't post anything political or funny cat pics or pictures of food or anything like that. It's just an extra layer of notifications anytime I release new content or start streaming. So be sure to check all that out. Okay, and I do play Rakan a lot, so if you like to watch Rakan, if you're trying to learn Rakan, the stream is going to be a great place for you. So just a little bit of background about me before we do this guide. I did cap out at D3 a couple of seasons ago. We didn't quite get back there last season, but we have been as high as D3. We play a lot of Rakan. Usually I would say at least 60 or 70% of our games in a season are probably going to be on Rakan. I've been playing since Season 1, so we've got thousands and thousands of games of experience, and then lots and lots of specifically Rakan experience. So hopefully I can share some of the lessons I've learned with Rakan to help you have a better experience and kind of optimize the way that you want to play him. Okay, so let's start off just talking about why would you want to play Rakan in general, how does he fit into the meta, and why do I think he's a great champion to try to main? Well, if you just look at the highest level of Rakan, you know that his potential is sky high because he's been the MVP support, I would argue, of pretty much every single Worlds that he's been a part of since Season 7. If you just go and look at the statistics on him, I think there was one season where he wasn't the highest win rate out of the top maybe 3 to 5 most played champions in a World. So he has 2 World skins over that time period, and frankly, a lot of people just pick something else just to be different, right? Just because they don't want another Rakan skin, but he's always a really high priority in Worlds and high-level competition. So the potential is there. The question is just, can you unlock that potential? And it is challenging because I would argue he's probably the second hardest mainstream support to play outside of Thresh, just because there are so many different decisions you can make with him, not only just on, which abilities you do, so should you engage or not, can you hit the skill shot on your W or not, but how do you want to sequence it, right? Should you E in first and then W? Should you double E and then W? Should you open with a W and then R and then double E back out? There's so many different ways that you can sequence his mobility to optimize it in a fight, because he can engage really well, he can peel really well, he has scaling off of his shields, he has, extra mobility. He can get utility items like a Ziggs or an Ardent Sensor, Mikhail's. There are just tons and tons of different ways you can play this champion in terms of, items, sequencing, your role in team fights, whether or not you should roam. He can do it all. He's almost like a Swiss Army knife of a support, but you have to make the right choices for the right situation. And you can, get hard punished if you don't make the right choices. He is very squishy, so if you do get caught out by CC, you are going to get blown up really quickly. And the best way, I think, to itemize him, and we'll talk about the items here in a little bit, is to build those utility items, is to build things like a Zeke's, like a Chemtech Putrefier or an Ardent Sensor, stuff that helps your team out, but is going to make you squishier. So that's a really dangerous play style, but you do have the mobility to make it work. You just have to understand the situation and use your mobility optimally. Okay, so let's get into his skills here really quickly. So, again, the main way to play him, he's really strong engaged, but also scales really well with items because of his healing and shielding, and then also has the option to get a lot of utility items that most other tanks can't get because he has the mobility to get back out of fights after he engages. He doesn't have to sit there and take hits like a Leona, like a Nautilus, so he doesn't need as much personal protection as some of those other champions. So that's what really makes him unique. Okay, so let's talk about his skills really quick, and then we'll talk about how you should skill him up and then some different options that are possible. Because over time, since his release, there have been, metas where you wanted a max Q or metas where you wanted a max shield. Currently, it's max W, but all of these can be pretty good skills in the right circumstances, depending on which items are in the meta, which champions are being played. and how, Riot decides to balance Rakan. So his first ability, and right now this is just kind of your 1-point wonder. You only want to put 1 point in this unless you're intending on going for a super hard poke lane. It does have a decent AP ratio, right? It's got like a 0.6, and then it's got 250 base damage if you do max it, but they have nerfed the cooldown on this significantly. I believe it used to be 6 seconds at max rank. So that's why people really don't max this anymore. It's just because it's not as effective as a poke tool as it used to be. Okay, so he flings a magical feather that hits the first target in front of him, deals magic damage, and if you hit a champion or an epic jungle monster like a dragon or a baron, then you get this little circle around you that lasts for 3 seconds, and if you get close to an ally, then it will proc and heal you for a flat amount based on your level, and then it has a 0.7 AP ratio on top of that. Or if you're not near anybody, it'll just naturally give you the heal after 3 seconds. So this is a pretty good tool for laning early on. It's got, a decent amount of base damage at 70, gives out a heal that's usually somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or 40 in the early game for both you and your ally. So it's okay. It's a decent early game poke, but most of the time your laning phase is not going to be phenomenal in terms of poke. You do have decent all-ins depending on which ADC you're laning with, but in general it's going to be as weak as skill, so you only put 1 point into it. But it is nice to get fairly early on for those trades. Okay, then you have your bread and butter ability here. So this is what you're going to max with most builds these days. He dashes forward for a pretty good distance. It doesn't say what the distance is here. I believe it's 700, but it's a pretty good amount where you dash forward, and there's like a pause for maybe about half a second, quarter second to half a second, and then he springs upward and he knocks up anyone that's around him within a certain radius. I believe the radius on it is like 100, 150. It's a pretty small radius. It's smaller than Alistar, but it's still large enough to where you can hit multiple people. It might be a 200 radius, but it's definitely smaller than Alistar's, which I think is 350. And it deals pretty good damage. I mean, 290 base when it's maxed out with a 0.7, and they have buffed this over time. So it's a pretty good amount of damage later on. It starts off with a really long cooldown, and you'll see that's a theme with a lot of Rakan stuff in the early game. 18 seconds, and then it scales all the way down to 12. But incredibly powerful ability. This can get you out of a lot of situations if someone's trying to, gank you, or if you're trying to get some deep wards. It's free dash, so you don't have to target anything. You can just jump whenever you want, wherever you want. So great for dodging skill shots, great for getting out of sticky situations. And then, of course, you also have the knock-up capability, which is the best form of CC. It's not reduced by tenacity, and also interacts with things like Yasuo, like Samira, anything else that cares about knockups. It's going to be a good combo. So overall, pretty strong ability. Just be aware of that cooldown. It's really long, and for people who are aware of Rakan's cooldowns, they will try to punish you while that's on cooldown. Okay, then you have your battle dance. So this is also a very long cooldown. As you can see, starts at 20 seconds and scales down to 12. So again, really long cooldowns during the laning phase. That makes ability haste particularly strong on him, because everything just has such a high, base cooldown that you're getting a lot of value out of the cooldown reduction. Then Rakan dashes to an allied champion, grants them a decent little shield for 3 seconds, and then you can recast it for free. It doesn't cost any additional mana. You can recast it for free within 5 seconds. I believe the range on that is 600 to 700. I think it's 6. And then on Xayah, you get a little bit of extra range. I think it's like 900 with Xayah. It's pretty far, but pretty good distance on that. And the main thing is you can do it twice, so you have to decide, where do you want to use these dashes? Do you want to use them on the same ally? Do you want to dash over to a different ally? And then the shield, don't forget, you can do that twice to reapply the shield. So it's really up to a 280 shield with a 1.6 ratio, which is massive, right? If you think about like a Janna shield is going to be 240 base with a 0.7. A Lulu shield, I think, only has a 0.6, might even be a 0.5 AP ratio. And a 240 base, so his shielding is stronger than them. Now, the cooldowns are longer. You can't target yourself with this shield, so you can't ever protect yourself. But it's very good at protecting allies. You just want to make sure, if possible, that you wait till the first shield expires before you shield them again, because it doesn't stack It'll just refresh the shield if you do it too quickly. So you want to keep track of that. And you can use this offensively. So this is where a lot of the decision making comes in with Rakan, where you can E over to an ally to close the distance so that it's easier to land your W, because the closer you are to somebody when you W, the faster it's going to go off, because you have to physically move at a certain speed. I think it's like 1400. They may have buffed it to 1800, but you move a certain speed to a location, and then you do the knock-up. So if you can E over to an ally where someone's right on top of them and then W, instead of just trying to W first, then it's going to be much, much faster in a lot of circumstances. Another neat trick with this is when you use the R, which we'll talk about in a second, this does not have a cooldown when you activate your R. You can't use your W for half a second once you turn on the R, but you can use your E. So you can R and then instantly E over to an ally to charm somebody to help peel them, and then you can use that W to knock them up. So a lot of decisions to be made here, and you have to be very careful of that range, because sometimes if you go too deep, your allies are not going to, give you that jump back, and then you can get caught. And a lot of Rakan's power is being able to go in, knock somebody up, and then get back out with your E. Because if you're not getting out, you're going to get blown up, right? Because you're not tanky like a Leona, like a Nautilus. At least with the optimal builds of Rakan, you're not going to be tanky. So you always want to make sure that your allies are going to be in range if you W. So just, keep an eye on that. Remember that if you use a Shirelia's or you're using your R or something else that's going to give you a lot of movement speed, just remember that your allies may not quite be there yet. And it could be a difficult situation for you. So just watch the ranges on that and think carefully about how you want to sequence it. Okay, and then you have your R. Very versatile skill, so you gain 75% movement speed for 4 seconds. Very long time. So you can activate this early and then, position around a fight or use it to get to a fight faster. So if there's a fight breaking out, in the mid lane and you're rotating over there and you're just not sure if you're going to get there in time, you can use your R to, gain that extra movement speed to maybe get there in time to shield them and then turn the fight around. So don't forget, you have a lot of time. And you can also use this extra movement speed to juke skill shots. You can use your R and then run and strafe something like a Lux or a Morgana, because when you're running at them with the R, they're probably just going to almost instinctively throw their Q at you to try to bind you before you W onto them. Then you can sidestep it with your R and then W onto them. So don't be afraid to use that movement speed to close the distance, or to, have the extra capability to dodge skill shots while it's going on, because, again, it lasts for 4 seconds. You have quite a long time to make use of it. And then anyone that Rakan touches, he's going to deal up to 300 damage with a 0.5 AP ratio, and then he charms them for up to 1.5 seconds when he touches them. Now, it is a very close touch. They've nerfed this over time. This is probably the biggest nerf, in my opinion, they've done to Rakan, outside of removing his instant R plus W, is that it used to be a much, much bigger hitbox. So it used to be like maybe a 300 radius, a 250 to 300 radius. But right now, you have to almost literally, your character model has to be on top of them, touching them. It feels like it's 100 or less radius on this. So you got to get used to it. It is a little weird, because sometimes it'll seem like you've hit them, but then you really didn't. So be careful with those touches. And then after you touch the first person, you gain an extra 150% movement speed that decays. So you do get a really nice burst of speed after that first person. And kind of like with your E, it takes a lot of practice and skill to understand just how much value you can get out of this. Because you can go in and get one person usually pretty easily with your R plus W, but then do you have time to touch other people to get even more charms before you have to go back out with your E? So this happens all the time, where Rakans will try to greed out, and get that first person with the R, and then they want to go touch one or two other people, and then they get caught by a piece of CC, or the timer runs out on their E. So if you R and then E in, touch an ally, and then W, hit somebody else, and then run at someone else, try to touch them, and then you don't get them in time, and your E times out, the second E jump, then you're stuck, right? So it's all about kind of calibrating just how much value do you want to get off of this R. How difficult is it going to be to touch multiple targets without risking, getting caught out and blown up? So takes a lot of practice to really use that optimally. If you're not sure, usually the best choice is just go for the one person that's guaranteed, and then probably get back out But there might be some circumstances where you could potentially get more people. So anyways, that's his kit. So it seems kind of unassuming, but there's a lot going on there, right? You have to make the choices with the R. You got to make the choices with the E. You have to hit the skill shot with your W. You have to think about, how do you want to sequence these? Do you want to E, then W, then E again? Do you want to R, E, or do you want to R and then run forward more and then W? There's a lot of different ways that you can manage him. I will say in general, a lot of times it's a good idea to hold your W if you have your R ticking until the enemy uses their mobility, if possible. You can't always do that, but just try running at them with your R first if you think you'll be able to get on them, and then wait until they flash or dash, and then after that, do the W. Because, yeah, it's still fine if you R in and then W and they flash it. You still traded your R for their flash, which is good, but obviously it's better if you can get their flash and potentially get a kill on them, or at least a lot of damage to run them out of the lane. So just watch for those opportunities. Just be patient, learn how to maximize some of your different sequences. And a lot of that's just going to be very contextual. Try to use the E if you can. If you have another ally that can engage first, or someone who's going to dive or flank, use your E to gap close, like I said, and then hold that W so that you can get some cleanup later on. So R plus E is usually your best way to get into fights if there's someone else who can get up there first, or if one of your teammates is caught or whatever. Using the R and then the E that you can do instantly, and then holding the W for the right situation is usually going to be the best call. But sometimes you are the primary engage. Sometimes you do have to run forward with the W if no one else can start a fight, or you see a really good opportunity. That's a good way to do it. One other thing that I will mention, I get asked about this on stream a lot, is how do you decide whether you should open up with just a W or use your R plus W? I would say if it's a laning situation, try to open with the W if you can, because if you miss the W, it's not that big of a deal most of the time. You can just E back out, and it's like no harm, no foul, right? But if you open with your R and then you W and they like dash out of it, or you miss or whatever, you're not going to have that cooldown. Plus, if you hit your W first for 1 second and then you wait until the enemy is about to hit the ground, then you R again, that's the maximum amount of CC you can get. Because if you R first and then W, then you're going to be overlapping the CC, and you're only going to get, second and a half, maybe 1 second out of it. So the maximum CC is going to be W first, then R. But sometimes that's not possible, right? If you're staring people down and they're watching you, especially if it's not the laning phase, you may not be able to get on top of them without the R. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you can greed out and go for the W first. Sometimes you have to R first. At higher levels of play, most people are going to R first. Another option is you can actually flash R on top of them if you want to guarantee you're going to hit them, right? If you're coming out of a bush or something, especially at higher elo brackets where people are going to have fast reflexes, you can R and then flash on them out of a bush and then W to knock them up if you want to. So yeah, again, lots of ways you can sequence it, but in the laning phase, especially at lower brackets, if they're not going to respect your W range, I would try to fish for the W first and then go for the R if you can. And usually when you land the knock up, then just go ahead and throw a Q point blank. It's not a massive ability, but the damage does add up. So just hit them with the W, Q them. If you have time, throw an auto attack in there, and then E and get back out. So those are just a few different sequences that you can do with Rakan to sort of optimize how he works. Okay. I will say a couple of things also about his abilities. You can't flash while you're in the W animation. So I know there are some champions out there where you can be like mid-animation, like an Alistar or something like that, and then flash. Like you can Q and flash with Alistar and, basically buffer your knock-up. You can't do that with Rakan. There are no interactions. There used to be one that was really weird when he first came out where you could press back while he was Wing in the middle of his W, and it would cancel the animation but still knock him up. And you could, basically save yourself a half a second of animation there, but you can't do that anymore. So if you watch older guides that say that, they fix that. So you can't do that. You can't use anything like a proto belt or something like that while you're in the middle of your W. Just pretty much disables all of your keys while you're in the middle of the W. So there are no cute mechanics in that regard. Okay, But let's talk about, I guess we'll start with the runes, and then we'll go into the itemization, and then talk about a couple of the matchups, and then we'll call it a day. So I think the vast majority of the time these days, I would probably go for Guardian to start with. The reason that Guardian is so good is you don't have any protection for yourself in your kit other than your passive, which just gives you a shield, which is okay. This is going to give you that extra little bit of personal protection, and it's going to give you an extra shield for your ally to give them a little bit more protection. So I think in a lot of cases that's just where you want to be. It's just getting a lot of value out of that Guardian for both of you. They have nerfed Guardian quite a bit over time. The shield value is much lower than it used to be, and the cooldown is much longer than it used to be, but it's still going to be your optimal choice. Another thing that you could do is Aftershock. Now, Aftershock has also been nerfed, but if you are afraid that you might get blown up, if they do have a lot of CC, and if you are the primary engage, you might consider Aftershock. It's going to give you some extra resists. You're not going to be getting a ton of resists yourself, but if you do want to get something like a Locket into a Zeke's, you will get a little bit more value out of the Aftershock. So it's a somewhat of a rare choice on Rakan because, again, you should, in a lot of circumstances, if you're making optimal decisions, you should be able to get out of your engages before you get, blown up. But if they're rocking Veigar, Morgana, Lux, Poppy, all of these other things that are going to make it difficult for you to move around, Aftershock could be a decent choice. As far as secondaries go, it kind of depends on the matchup and the items that you want to get. Font of Life is good if you're going to get Ardent Censer or Staff of Flowing Water, because whenever you put this mark on somebody and your allies damage them, that counts as a heal coming from you. It's not lifesteal, it's a heal coming from you. And so anything that checks whether or not you're healing, like Ardent Censer, like Staff of Flowing Water, it's just going to help you unlock that potential to your allies a lot more. So if you're doing that, or if you intend on getting Putrefier, then that also works, because Putrefier is whenever you heal or shield somebody, their next auto attack or spell applies a 60% grievous wound for 6 seconds. So if you have that font on, then it's going to constantly empower your allies and really crank up a lot of that anti-healing. So if you find yourself, going Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent Censer or Chemtech Putrefier, then this is probably going to be a good rune for you. Now, if you're wanting to go for something like Zeke's, which is probably Zeke's or maybe Redemption second item, then you might want to consider the other choices. I think that Demolish is pretty good if you're planning on going Zeke's, just because there's a chance, it could give you an additional 1 or 2 tower plates during the laning phase, which is some nice gold. And it just helps you take towers. Later on in the game, towers are obviously powerful. So if you're not going to get a lot of use out of Font, if you're not going to be getting the items that Font empowers, then Demolish can be a decent choice. Some people go for Shield Bash. I think the numbers are personally a little too low on this. Yes, you do cause a bit more damage when it's up, and you are going to get a little bit more armor and magic resist. So that definitely does have some value to it. But the fact that you can't ever shield yourself means that this is only going to be up when your passive is up, which is basically like once every 30 seconds or so, if you're hitting people with Qs and auto-attacking and all that kind of stuff. So it's okay, but I think it's kind of all in on the laning phase and just, in my opinion, doesn't do enough. This row is really balanced, so you kind of have to decide what you want to do. A lot of times I like conditioning just to get that guaranteed value for later in the game when you might get blown up. If you are against a heavy poke lane, like a Xerath, Misfortune, that type of thing, you could get Second Wind, which will give you some decent healing in the laning phase, but is otherwise pretty worthless. And then Bone Plating is one of the most overrated runes, I think, out there, because it's so easy to get this poked off of you, and it has such a long cooldown at 45 seconds, and it only protects from the same champion. So after taking damage from any champion, the next 3 spells and attacks you receive from them, not all enemies, just that one specific champion. So in a team fight, it may not even block as much as it seems like it would, because it doesn't block everybody. It just blocks the first person that hits you. So it's okay, but I feel like a lot of ADCs or supports are going to be able to poke this off of you, right? If you take this into Sona, she's going to be spamming Qs on you. Nami's going to be spamming waves. Soraka's going to be spamming Qs. Caitlyn's just going to auto-attack it off of you. Jin's spamming grenades. So it's just really hard to, not get this poked off of you in a lot of lanes in the bot lane. So It's okay if they have an all-in, comp where they're really not going to poke you a lot. So if it's like against Leona, Tristana, or something like that, maybe you could run this. But most of the time, I would probably just go for conditioning. And then as the final setup here, Revitalize is good if you're going to get a lot of plus healing and shielding items, but I've really come to enjoy Overgrowth a lot of times, especially if you're going to go for a Zeke's build, just because when you have more armor and magic resist, you get more effective health when you get HP. And this is not like an insane rune, but, in the mid to late game, it can give you an extra, 150 HP, which does add up. So I tend to like Overgrowth, but if you are going for like a Moonstone build or Redemption or something like that, then Revitalize can be a decent option. Unflinching is okay. You do get 10% tenacity and slow resist. I just find that a lot of times I get blown up or killed anyways, even if I have unflinching. But if they do have a lot of CC, you can't, especially really long CC like a Veigar 3-second, stun, or Morgana 3-second bind, or Ash Arrow, something like that, then unflinching is definitely something worth considering. If it's just a bunch of quick pieces of CC like a Leona or something like that, I'm not entirely sure that it's worth it, but possibly. But yeah, all of these are pretty decent, just depending on which items you get and how you want to run it. And then I personally like Ulti Hunter in the secondary, just because you have such a high impact ult. You can make plays and just snowball really hard in the game with Rakan, with that ultimate. There's almost never a situation where you can't put that ult to use. So I tend to like the Ulti Hunter. Relentless Hunter is good, especially if you want to roam a lot. If you think you're going to be, camping mid lane or something like that, Relentless Hunter can be a pretty good choice. It is only out of combat, so it doesn't help you after you've already started your engage. It's not going to allow you to run around with your R and tag additional targets. But it is good for finding the right situation. And then I would go either Zombie Ward or Ghost Poro. Lately, I've been favoring Ghost Poro just because it gives you that extra vision in the early game before you get your wards completed, which can help you, play more aggressively in lane and be aware of the ganks. And it can also help you watch those early dragons, because dragon stacking is obviously really strong. Last season, they lowered the cooldown on it by 1 minute, and then, of course, they added in, the souls and the elder dragon and things like that. So Ghost Poro helps you control those early dragons a little bit more. Zombie Ward is good, especially at higher elos, if everybody's placing wards everywhere and you're getting a lot of value out of your sweepers with the Zombie Ward, then that can be good. But in lower elos, a lot of people just aren't going to be warding very often, and I've just found that I just almost never get to 10 Zombie Wards with this thing, in Platinum, in Gold. It just doesn't happen. And Ghost Poro is a lot easier to stack too, and that does matter, right? When you get this stacked up to 10 Poro stack, then you basically get 30 AP, which is a lot of value, right? That's over 600 gold value, and you scale really well with AP. Your shield is like a 1.6 ratio, so you do want to complete these stacks on these items. But Ghost Poro is nice because not only when it Poros do you get 1 stack, but if the Poro sees somebody, you get 2 more stacks. So every time your ward times out on the map, if it's not swept, then you have the potential to get additional stacks off of the Poro. And just depending on where you put your wards, if you put your wards in some decent spots, like warding the camps, a lot of people aren't going to sweep their camps, right? So if you put this like on the Wraiths or in the Golem Pit or in the red, on top of the red or whatever, people aren't going to sweep that as much. They're going to be sweeping stuff, around the river brush. They're going to be sweeping tri-bush, just the popular gank pass, but often they won't sweep the camps as much. So if you're warding the camps, which you can do with Rakan pretty easily because you have so much mobility, you can go deeper into the jungle without as much risk, I think it's going to be easier to stack up these Ghost Poros. And they're probably going to trigger the Poro unless they just don't want to do the camp. I mean, if they're ranged, I guess maybe they don't have to, but I've just been digging the Ghost Poro. Other options that you can run, in the past, people have done Airy. I think the Airy build was a lot better when you could max Q. So it's not like it's horrible right now. It actually has a higher win rate than the Guardian build, although it's a much lower play rate. Airy's good. Your shield can potentially apply it twice. If you wait the max duration on the shield, you might be able to catch the Airy and apply it twice, so that's good. You get a little bit of extra poke with the Q. It can never protect you, though, personally. Guardian protects you, Airy never will. So keep that in mind. You're going to be a lot squishier. And then you've got Nimbus Cloak, which is okay. It has been nerfed a lot, but if you're flashing in, you do get that extra movement speed, or if you use Ignite, you get the extra movement speed. Celerity is okay. It's great with your ultimate. You can also use the extra cooldown reduction off of Transcendence. And then these bottom rows are okay. You know, you can get Gathering Storm. Scorch is not phenomenal on Rakan just because you have a pretty long cooldown Q early on, and his Q is just not strong. Oh, you're done with Big Poe? Okay, well, I don't know where my Poe is. You want to look around and see if you can find my Poe? I'll be done in just a second, okay? So, anyways, that is an old school build that people did go with the Airy, but like I said, I wouldn't do it. That was mostly you got a lot of value off of spamming your Q before it was nerfed, when it did more damage, had a lower cooldown. But this day and age, I just probably wouldn't do it. And there are some other cute things you can try. You can try like Unsealed Spellbook. He is good with lots of different summoners, but it just compounds your weakness in the laning phase in a lot of matchups. So again, I'd probably steer clear of that. If you do want to do Inspiration as a secondary, you can take something like Boots plus Cosmic, which are, you know, really powerful secondary runes. I'd probably rather have Ulti Hunter, but this does save you a little bit of money getting the free boots, and that can help accelerate you into your second item. So if you think you need a really good team fight item, like an Ardent Sensor or something like that on your team, then maybe getting Magical Footwear is good. The downside, of course, is you can't really roam that well, and Rakan really, really wants movement speed because of his ultimate. So it's kind of rough getting the Magical Footwear. Another old school build that you could try, if they have a ton of CC, is just getting like Legend Tenacity and Triumph as your secondaries. You know, that can help you out against, you know, your Ashes, your Vagars, your Morganas, stuff with huge CC. Lately, I've just been getting Mercury Treads instead. You know, you can go for Unflinching plus Mercury Treads, and that's going to be a lot. That's going to be up to 55% tenacity, and that's already pretty good. There is a tenacity cap. I don't remember exactly what it is. But I know that the minimum CC duration on something is half a second. So I feel like it's a little bit of overkill to go for Legend Tenacity. It has also been nerfed over time. I don't remember the exact numbers they nerfed on it, but they have nerfed it for sure. So I wouldn't go that build anymore, but there are some older school people who would do that. So I'll be done in just a minute, okay, Rory? Just hang on.
Can you find your...
I can. I'll find it in just a second. Just hang on. Let Daddy finish this. Just a couple more minutes, and we'll go find it, okay? Okay. So that's it for runes. And then as far as items go, and then I won't take too much longer on this, but there are a lot of different items that can be effective on Rakan. Right now, I think Shirelia's is the place to be, just because having that extra movement speed is pretty massive, right? Giving 25% movement speed to yourself and allies. And that is a thing that, or I guess 30% bonus movement speed. That's something that has been nerfed. I think it used to be like 60% or something crazy. So it did get nerfed, which is kind of rough on Rakan. But it's still where you want to be. It has the exact same stats these days as Mandate and Moonstone. So you're going to get the same, you know, the same AP, the same mana regen, all that good stuff. But then you have, you know, the extra movement speed, which is great for your engage. It's great with a lot of other champions in the meta right now, like Hecarim, super popular. And you got your Olaf, your Darius, your Garen, all that kind of stuff. Kind of the bruiser type of champs have been very strong in all of Season 11, and it looks like they're still going to be strong in Season 12. So being able to dish out that movement speed is really huge. And then they added this Motivate extra movement speed. I don't remember if it was last season or the season before, but pretty much whenever you shield somebody, both you and that person are going to be getting 25% extra movement speed for a second and a half. So something you can do to just help your team just run somebody down is just shield, you know, wait a few seconds, and then shield again. Because the same ally can't be motivated. Like, they can be motivated once every 4 seconds. I believe the shield, you have a 5-second timer on it. Yeah, it's within 5 seconds. So after you shield them, just wait for 4 seconds, and then right before that 5th second is going to go off, shield them again, and then you get the double extra movement speed. So that is pretty handy. You can also use your Q and the heal off of that to activate as well. We're almost ready, Rory. Now it says empowering or protecting an ally, so I do not believe that works with font, right? So that is a that is a heal that comes from you. But I don't know. I just don't know with that terminology if it counts as a heal or not. So I don't think that it does, but it might. But either way, this item's very good on Rakan because of just the normal stats on it. It has the active, like I said, and it has that relatively new Motivate passive, which works extremely well with the double shield. Okay, so great mobility on that item. Another popular item is Locket, and I've had people ask me about this on stream, especially into Assassins. As you can see, it doesn't have the greatest win rate in the world, but it can be useful in some situations. It does give you an extra little bit of tankiness. It's also going to give you that, AoE shield. Now, there are more and more champions that have shield breaking abilities. Zeri's about to come into the game, the ADC, as of the making of this video, and she has, benefits that she gets off of shields. So, take that with a grain of salt. It does also give everybody some extra armor and magic resist, which is pretty cool. So it's a really good team fight item. My main complaint with this item is it doesn't have any mana management on it. So it doesn't have any flat mana, and it doesn't have any mana per 5 on it. And that's a big problem with Rakan because his mana costs are pretty expensive. He does not get a lot of extra mana per level, and his flat mana regen is fairly low. I think it's like 8, whereas most enchanters have 11 mana per 5 baseline. And remember that your fairy charms and all those types of support items scale based off of your baseline mana regen. So he's already going to have a bit of a tough time just because of his normal baseline mana regen. But these spells are expensive. It's 100 mana for the shield. The W is 90 mana. The Q is pretty cheap. The R is relatively cheap. But these other abilities are expensive, and so I just find in the mid-game, if you rush Locket first, you will definitely feel it in some fights. And just because Rakan is so good at skirmishing and showing up, to different YOLO queue situations, roaming mid, rotating to the jungle, he can just be out on the field for an extended period of time trying to make plays sometimes. Oh, thank you. That's very nice. So I have had mana issues with that. Now, there are a few ways you can work around that. So you can start off with Spell Thief's Edge. I don't recommend this item. I know that it looks like it's fairly popular because you're a lot squishier with this. You don't have any health regen in the lane. You're not going to get as much bonus health later on in the game. And it's conditional. You have to constantly trade with them. So you have to be going in with your W and your Q pretty much every time off cooldown and landing it a lot in order to make sure that you get your wards on time. Because again, he has really long cooldowns that are mana intensive in the laning phase, so it's hard to stack this. Much harder than it is with someone like Anami in a lot of lanes, unless you're completely stomping him. So that means that your wards might be, 3 to 5 minutes later if you get this. However, it does have the mana regen on it, so that is going to help you out if you do want to go lock it, or if you are taking, more aggressive trades. Those can be some decent options, and it is going to have more ability power on it late game as well. So your shields are going to be a bit bigger, your W and your R are going to do more damage. So it is a nice, really aggressive offensive option, but most of the time I would just take Relic Shield because it's going to give you that guaranteed wards. It's really hard for the enemy to deny you Relic Shield procs consistently. So you're going to get those wards on time, you're going to have the extra health regen in the laning phase, and you get better control of the wave. I mean, this is something that a lot of people underestimate, but just being able to push the wave faster, having those relic stacks, and just knocking out the cannon and knocking out a couple of melee minions can mean a 5-second difference in your back timing. And that can mean, maybe you get to that dragon on time to defend it or take it or not, or maybe you have an extra 5 seconds to go place a ward without losing experience in the lane. So it really does add up, those relic shield procs, not just in terms of their consistency, but in terms of wave management. So that is an option. If you want to go lock it, you can go for this. You could go for something like Biscuits secondary, like Biscuits plus Cosmic Insight, if you do want to go lock it as well. So you do have some options available to you, but I think you have to go much further out of your way to get the locket. So I don't know. Obviously, some people do it. It can be helpful in some matchups, but I feel like it's rare on a lot of top-end Rakans to get the locket. But if the enemy has a really good team fight and you just want to protect your team, maybe there are ways to do it. You can also just back more frequently, and just not get caught up in the YOLO queue and just be a little more careful with your mana management. Maybe that's good enough. Because you can get, after your first item, you can get, other items that have mana management, almost all of your second items you'll get are going to have some kind of mana on it. So it's really just once you complete Locket, but before you get, your Fairy Charm or your Sapphire or whatever. So anyways, that's a decent option. They did nerf Even Shroud. This was something that was popular for a while before it got nerfed. It's the same stats as Locket, has the same problem with mana management, but it does give you a little bit more damage, 9% extra damage on people, so, that can be pretty helpful. I think Locket is probably higher impact at this point just because it is such a huge shield in team fights. But Even Shroud, if you want to go for that, you can. I would probably, if you want to go for just like more damage on a target, I'd probably just go for Band-Aid. It's not super popular right now, but it does have the ability power, so it's going to buff up your own personal damage. And the damage that you do off of this, if your ally follows up on a single target, is possibly higher than Even Shroud, especially in the early game. You're talking 135 base damage on the proc. It gives you and your ally extra movement speed. So in team fights, you're going to be faster with your R. You can tag additional targets. Your ally is going to be able to chase or kite more effectively. And it's basically always up, right? Whenever you're slowing or immobilizing people. So anyways, it's pretty close, Even Shroud and Mandate. I think scaling-wise, Even Shroud might be a little bit better over time, but I don't know. Mandate is very similar. It's going to be pretty good, and it's going to have better mana management early on. You can go for a more AP-centric build. I have tried Everfrost once they buffed it to 2,800 gold. It is nice. You are squishier. Not having that movement speed is definitely very noticeable, but you do get 80 ability power, which is a lot. You're really going to be hitting people for a surprising amount of damage. You do get big-time mana management with 600 mana, and you're going to be able to chain together some CC, right? So whenever you hit somebody with your W, then you can hit them with that root for an extra 1.5 seconds, plus the proc damage. And it's up a lot. It's up 30 seconds. So it is a very good item. It's not that much more. It's like 300 gold more. And I did try it. I just lost a lot on it, but I could have been just playing it poorly. But I think that if you believe you are going to stomp the lane and you just want extra aggression in the laning phase, or you want extra CC to chain together, it can be, potentially a pretty strong item. It's just that movement speed. I'm telling you, if you play with Shurelya's a lot and then all of a sudden you don't run Shurelya's, it's very, very noticeable. Okay, Rory, hang on for a second. We'll go, okay? Daddy's going to finish this video. Rory's, that's a timeout here. Not going to timeout, but her patience is running thin. Okay, we're almost done. So yeah, those are pretty much the mainstream starting items. You could also try like Moonstone if you want. I would just go more aggressive with Rakan. You're going to get outscaled by other enchanters anyways in terms of just raw healing. But if you don't have any other healing on your team, and if you're pretty confident the enemy is not going to get grievous wounds, then Moonstone could be okay. But again, it's rare. It does have a decent win rate. But I probably wouldn't get it, but if you really want to, you can try it out. And then, other stuff you can try as well, but I don't want to make this a 3-hour video. Almost anything can work on Rakan, but those are the optimal, realistic choices, I think. Okay, as far as other items go, the boots, as far as your boots go, I would probably just try to get Ionians most of the time because, again, you have really long cooldowns, so Rory just wants to be on the camera. You have really long cooldowns, so Ionians is a big deal, especially because your ult, again, should be a kill every time it's off cooldown. If you have to, if you're in a bad situation, Mercury Treads can be pretty strong as well. So Mercs are going to have a negative win rate just because you're already in a bad situation if you're running Mercs. Okay, hang on, Rory. You're already in a bad situation if you're running Mercs most of the time. It means they have a lot of CC on their team, and Rakan does not excel in those situations. So it's almost never going to have a positive win rate, but it still is good. And then mobility boots, it just kind of waxes and wanes depending on the meta. It's obviously going to allow you to roam really well, so if you think that you're going to be able to make a ton of plays in the mid lane specifically, you've got like a Malzahar mid lane and the enemy has like some melee champion or something else you can lock down and kill, mobility boots are very good for roaming and also for vision control, because that's going to allow you to get into the jungle, get those wards, and get out of there faster. So it's going to have less risk on it. And you're going to be losing less XP in the lane because you're going to get back to the lane faster. And it's less likely that your ADC is going to die because you're going to be back in the lane faster. So there's definitely an argument to be made for mobility boots as well. You just have to kind of feel out the situation. But the vast majority of people these days are going Ionians just because it is such a huge buff for your ultimate, your other abilities, and also your flash and your ignite, both of which are really strong on Rakan, because the flash opens up several different combos you can do, especially at higher elos that are effective with your ult specifically. Okay. And then, Rory, here, sit down. I'll help you out. Hold on. What? We can just move it down a little bit here. There we go. Okay. So that 12 summoner spell haste is pretty good. Oh, and ignite, because you can get on the back line and get to their squishies pretty comfortably in a lot of comps with Rakan, that gives ignite an extra little bit of value there. So you don't just have to ignite the tank that's running at you. That's still an okay option in a lot of situations, but now you can ignite those squishies and help your divers really delete them before they do too much damage. Okay, next few items. And I definitely want to keep this under an hour for sure. But Chemtech Putrefier is still one of the more popular ones. We talked about this earlier. If you take Font of Life, whenever you CC somebody with your ult or with your R, and anyone auto-attacks that person, that counts as a heal coming from you and will put the Putrefier on them. And just your normal shields can apply to Putrefier, and your Q whenever you heal somebody. So it's just a really efficient item overall. It has 55 ability power on it. It's got 20 ability haste, mana regens, almost everything you could want except survivability. So if they have a lot of assassins on their team or someone who's getting really fed, it can be rough, right? If they have a 5-0 Zed and it's like, it's hard to buy this item because it's going to have no armor on it. But you could get a defensive boot and then get this item if you really need to, if the situation starts getting grim. That is a possibility. But the fact that this can come online for 2,300 gold, it's very cost efficient, and you can get it from the support role is really nice. That means your carries aren't going to have to, waste their gold getting Roanonomicon or Executioners. So this is still a go-to item in a lot of situations. Even though the healing has been nerfed a little bit in terms of Gore Drinker and some of the other, most egregious cases, there's still a lot of Moonstones floating around out there, a lot of Sorakas, a lot of Sonas, a lot of Canes. So there's still a lot of lifesteal, and this is one of the best, if not the best, Grievous Wound item in the game. Just because it's so easy to meet the conditions for 60%, it's so cost efficient, and you like all the stats, like I said before. So that's a go-to item. Another one I've been building a lot lately is Zeke's. Just because it's a good compromise item. It does give you personally some tankiness, which is really nice. 25 armor, 250 health. It gives you the flat mana that you want. 20 ability haste, which is really good. It's still very cheap. It's only 2,400 gold. And it buffs up a single ally quite a bit. So it scales based on just your level, your health, and your AP. So all of these stats that you're going to be getting. Okay, in just a second we'll do it. So that is pretty nice, that it scales off of all these different stats that you want, and it applies not only on hit abilities, which it's always done, so like auto attacks from your AD carry, but it also applies on ability hits, on spell hits, and so it can apply to like Azir soldiers, for example, or it's not ticks on dots, but just every time they hit them with something. So like Cassiopeia Fangs or Ziri and her stuff now, her Qs count as ability hits. So there's a lot of different interactions with champions that are pretty good. And typically in the mid game, it's going to be doing 80 or 90 extra damage per hit. So it's really good. It's basically like an amped up Ardent Sensor that only affects one target, is a good way to think about it. So it's a tankier Ardent Sensor with a much better build path that just basically doubles up on the Ardent Sensor proc on a single target. That's not exactly what it is, but that's a good way to think about it. It's heavier on one person rather than the whole team, and it has better stats. So that's why most people, if you want an offensive item to help your team out, have moved towards Zeke's and have kind of moved away from the Ardent Sensor in a lot of team comps. And then you can also go Redemption. This one's more rare, like It is good. This is a decent option if you're going Locket. Then you can go Redemption next because it's going to give you the mana regen and then the extra 20% healing and shielding that you get off of Redemption applies to the Locket shield as well. And so Locket can buy time for everybody so they don't get blown up immediately, and then Redemption can heal them back to full. So that's a really good combo if you want to go all in on kind of the 5v5 team fight, especially if the enemy team is not going to have a lot of grievous wounds. Then Redemption can be good. The obvious problem with Redemption is you have to actually hit it. Your teammates have to stand in the circle, and you have to actually aim it correctly to get a lot of value out of it. Because if you're not landing those hits, it just really doesn't give you a ton of value. And you're going to be relatively squishy with this. It does give you the flat health, but it doesn't have the armor on it. But it's a decent compromise item if you do want to, you know, amplify those 5v5 team fights. It's also decent at like semi-map pressure as well, right? So if you have a split pusher and you just want to throw a Redemption halfway across the map to help them out with their all-in, you can do that as well. So Redemption's one of the best design support items, I think, in a really long time, just because it is skill expressive, both for yourself, your allies, and your enemies. They can all interact with it in different ways. So it's a good item. You just don't see it as often as you used to, but it's still going to be pretty strong. Knight's Vow is another one that I've wanted to buy this more often, and this used to be somewhat of a staple on Rakan as a third or fourth item, or at least a decent option in seasons past, but it's just kind of been nerfed a lot. I think it doesn't have the armor on it anymore. It does have a lot of health, so, you know, that is good, but it doesn't reduce as much damage. It used to be a flat 15% redirection, and you also used to heal for a certain percentage of damage that your ally did. But it no longer does that. You no longer heal for that amount, and usually, okay, so it redirects 10% of the damage they take, and you heal for 8% of the damage dealt by the worthy champions. They have less than this. The damage reduction. Okay, so it starts at 10%, so they did put the heal back in. I forgot a few patches ago. So, but it's only 10% instead of 15. It goes up to 20 if they're low, but by the time they're low, it might already be too late. So I don't know. Maybe it's worth considering more times than I typically get it, but it is on the table if you want to protect from different assassins. Zhonya's Hourglass, I wouldn't get this most of the time. I know there are a couple of Rakans out there that really enjoy this item. It can help you out if you're going in, if you think you are going to get blown up and you just want to stall for a little bit. It's not horrible. It's 2,600 gold. I think they increased the price. I believe it used to be 2,500. It does give you some armor, so that's some survivability, which is good. The problem is it just doesn't help your allies out at all, right? Versus all of these other items, you know, help your allies out in different ways. So it's a pretty greedy item just to have the cute, you know, go golden in the middle of a fight, which is nice. But again, if you're making the correct decisions and you're fully optimizing your mobility, you shouldn't need to do that. So there might be some cases where if they have like a Zed that keeps targeting you, or they have a Karthus, or, you know, just some other stuff that's going to be really difficult to dodge, sure. But I think you're kind of losing a chance to buff your teammates, which is one of the major strengths of Rakan if you get this item. So I would make it situational at best. Again, I understand there are really good players out there that do get it, but I think that it should be a situational pick. Mikhail's has kind of fallen out of favor, but it's still like not horrible. It's 2,300 gold. In the past, it used to be 2,100 gold. So, you know, that does hurt. It used to also have 20 ability haste, I believe, back in the day. Now it only has 15. I could be wrong about that. But the stats just aren't as strong as they used to be. And it used to give your allies bonus movement speed whenever you cleansed them. It gave them like 30% movement speed or something for 2 seconds. Now they got rid of that and gave it this dinky little heal. So it's not going to help your allies get out of situations as much as it used to. But it's still pretty good at, you know, getting people out of heavy CC. So you might consider this if they have like an Ash Arrow or, you know, a Morgue Bind, maybe a Lux Bind. You know, stuff like that can be good. So if you're going to get value out of the magic resist, if they have, you know, a lot of magic damage and the cleanse is going to be really good on your allies, then this is good. But you have to remember to use it, and you have to understand the timings on when you're going to use this to fully optimize it. So difficult to use, especially at lower elo brackets, because you really need to coordinate with your team. Some people might just like not be ready for it either, and they just already taken their hand off the keyboard and they're like cussing at the screen. Okay, it is a witch. Hang on just a second. We're almost done. You gotta, they just got CC'd by Ash Arrow and they're just not ready for it, and then you cleanse them and they die anyways because they weren't ready to be cleansed. So much better item at higher elo brackets, but can still work in lower brackets as well. And then Staff of Flowing Water, I'm kind of surprised it's down that low, because I still think this is a really good option in a lot of comps, especially if you have Font of Life. I mean, giving your allies extra ability haste and extra ability power for a certain amount of time is really good, and obviously that's going to be good on you personally as well. So I would definitely consider Staff if you're ahead and you just want to snowball harder. I think Staff is a pretty good option. And that's it pretty much, I think, for the mainstream items. I would probably just Ardent Sensor is another one that I mentioned before, which is really good if you have a lot of people on your team that do benefit from the on hit. If you have like a Twitch and Kindred or Akshan or something else top lane, there's a lot of different things you could do that that can be effective with that. But anyways, I think that's probably about it. We'll make it a little bit shorter, but anyways, that's gonna be it. Thank you very much. Like I said, come by, check out the stream if you want. It's on Twitch starting around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, usually going until about 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's a very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. I'm happy to talk about Rakan as much as you want to talk about Rakan. Like I said, he's extremely flexible. There are a lot of different builds that can work, and he's always evolving, right? The meta is always changing. There are always new items, new nerfs, new buffs, and there's so many different ways that he can take advantage of those, that I think that makes him a really fun champion to play a lot. So I also did a one-trick tier list, which I'll probably have that linked at the beginning or at the end of this video. But he was, at the top of my one-trick with Thresh in terms of supports that I recommend for that reason, because he's so flexible and so fun to try to solve and figure out what's optimal on him as the game evolves. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.